hits all the time.
We are family.
Max are double-digit Ks.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
Fun to watch.
Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Into the upper deck.
Intensity is not a curfew.
Oh, mercy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sorry about that. I put our mics down for a second. It is the MASN All Access podcast. Brendan Mortensen, Paul Mancano. We're off to a flying start here on the podcast, trying to produce it and run it from our apartment in a foggy downtown Baltimore right now. So apologies there, Brendan.
Yeah, we're off to a fun start. This is going to be, I mean, we are coming out swinging.
Heck of a podcast.
We're coming out swinging with the title of this podcast. We are just...
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this, or even if you're listening to it, we're going to be talking about Anthony Santander and the potential that he could be dealt. It is a topic that has been thrown around recently by some in the Baltimore media, and a very real possibility. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So before you jump down our throats about that and get very upset at us for talking about it, you can do that in just a second. Brendan, I got stuck in an elevator this week.
You did.
I did.
And you told me about it, and I'm going to be honest, I laughed.
No, and I didn't even tell you about it. I posted it on my Snapchat story, my Instagram story, and you saw it, and you were like, oh, is that our apartment? And I said, no, it's our girlfriend's. And you said, that was the most amount that you cared about that.
Yeah.
So thanks for just making sure that I didn't die. Your roommate and podcast
you're
host.
here, so I assume it went okay.
Process over results. I could have died in that elevator.
Well, Paul, let's
suffocated.
hear about this near-death experience.
It was really not that exciting. I was really kind of hoping it would be a great story, and
it's not.
It wasn't.
And yet
awesome.
we are leading the podcast with it.
It was 25 minutes of my life where I was just kind of there. And do you get
so you stood in one place for 25 minutes?
I thought about sitting because I was like, if they accidentally cut a cord,
this is riveting.
It is. If they cut a cord here and this thing plummets, I mean, I'm hitting my head immediately on the ceiling, and that's lights out.
Right.
So, but I was like, I don't want to seem informal when the fire truck opens the fireman opens.
Is there
the
a
door.
level of formality that you should have when you're stuck in an elevator?
There really is. I was not well dressed enough for the occasion. I could hear as I was in. They said, "Oh, we're bringing the fire department here to get you," and I could hear from inside the elevator 2 fire trucks come down the street, and I thought, boy, I really hope there's not a fire going on in Baltimore right now, because I have just taken the 2 available fire trucks in the area and deprived
for really not a huge deal.
Not a huge deal at all. No,
in comparison.
No.
To at least if there was a fire.
If there was a fire, yeah.
Well, that was a riveting story.
But they said, "Is that MASN All Access host Paul Mancano stuck in there?"
They did not say that.
We got to send 2 fire trucks, not just one.
They did not say
and,
that.
I guess I'm priority at that point. So anyway, I got out. Yeah, it was
exciting
it's
stuff.
a life experience. It's a box I can check, but, not all that riveting.
Well, Paul, I had something more riveting that I was hoping that we would lead the podcast with. Some football happened over the weekend.
Football.
The NFC and AFC championship games. And one of those teams that advanced to the Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at the beginning of the NFL season, Paul and I went on this MASN All Access podcast, and we threw out our most spicy NFL takes. And Paul, I believe one of your takes surrounded those NFC champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Should we play
it?
Not?
I think we should roll the tape.
That's
my spicy take.
All right. My spicy take is probably not all that spicy, which is that the Tampa Bay Bucs are going to suck. There's just no way they can be good. There's just no way they can be
I mean, there's a few ways they could be good.
No, you take a 48-year-old Tom Brady, a 90-year-old Rob Gronkowski. They signed Leonard Fournette, who's never going to be good and never has been good.
Oh,
that team is just...
Leonard Fournette
he has never been good in his NFL career. Great at LSU, just not good.
That is a spicy take.
I see them winning 4 games.
4?
4 games.
4?
Maybe 5. Maybe 5.
I think the Bucs not living up to expectations this year would be if they win like 8 games. But 4?
I think it's going to be funny because both the Bucs are going to be terrible and the Patriots are not terrible, but not good. And I stand by it.
You stand by that take.
Overrated. I mean, what an easy path to the Super Bowl. They're going to get their clocks cleaned by the Chiefs. Whew. Look, I may have underestimated 98-year-old Tom Brady.
Just a bit.
And 106-year-old Rob Gronkowski.
Well, that's why we have an Orioles podcast and
not a football
podcast.
Yeah, if you're listening to me for any kind of advice, at predictions, betting advice,
don't do it.
Just don't do it. I am notoriously bad at fantasy football.
Yep.
Haven't made the playoffs, I'm pretty sure, since high school.
Yep.
I do not place bets on sports because I know that I would be broke and bankrupt at this point. I am very bad at sports predictions of all kinds. So even baseball. Just don't listen to my advice. So for the rest of this podcast, just ignore, when I talk, just imagine the Charlie Brown parent voice, the wah, 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 wah.
That went from Paul can't predict what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to do
to Paul is worthless.
You shouldn't listen to Paul about
anything. Nothing.
Anything regarding anything.
Nope. All right. Well, are you glad you got that shot in there? I'm pretty sure that your prediction, Brendan, which you kept out of that fun little clip there, was that Christian McCaffrey would break the all-purpose yards record.
And we don't know if he would have if he had stayed healthy for the entire season.
But the thing is, he didn't.
I stand by my take.
How many games did he end up playing? Like 5?
I think like 3. I stand by my take because if Christian McCaffrey was healthy,
he 200 yards.
You don't know.
But it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Might have.
It didn't happen. And so don't listen to Brendan for advice either.
Well,
it's, football advice.
I guess we're both out then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm putting all my chips on the table on the Chiefs to win this thing. Actually, who's your prediction? I know we're 2 weeks away, so
I've got the Chiefs.
You got the Chiefs?
Yeah.
I think Brady's going to pull. I'm predicting that the Chiefs are going to win, but I just feel in the back of my, I thought Green Bay was going to win that game, but in the back of my head, I was like, there's just no way Brady will.
Well, I think the Chiefs signed Jonathan VR because he's a free agent, and then that puts them over the top.
See, that was a great transition.
Thank you. I thought it was natural.
We talked about Jonathan VR on our last podcast, the potential for the Orioles to bring him back in free agency and where he might fit with this team. And during the week, I was thinking about the fact that Hanser Alberto is still a free agent out there. I do think the Orioles will make some addition to their infield, whether it's a minor league or major league deal. And I thought, would you rather have Jonathan VR or Hanser Alberto inserted into this infield? Let's assume for now that they're the same price point because I have no idea what kind of deals these two guys would sign. I would guess one or 2 year deals for both these guys. But if you had your pick, if you're Mike Elias and both these guys come at the same price, would you rather have Hanser Alberto or would you rather have Jonathan VR?
I'd rather have Jonathan VR for a few reasons. First, I think VR is more highly regarded around the league. I think if the Orioles signed VR and he had a good start to 2021, he's a guy who could be dealt around the deadline. Whereas Hanser Alberto, I would have to imagine that Mike Elias at least fielded some calls for Hanser Alberto before parting ways with him this offseason to see if there was any interest around the league in trading for him. And you have to imagine that there probably wasn't much interest there, or at least enough interest to start a trade with someone. I think VR is a little bit more dangerous at the plate. He's a better power hitter, and then once he's on base, he's a much better base stealer, and he plays a more valuable position at shortstop. I know they are kind of similar in their versatility, where you could put VR at shortstop or second base, and Alberto you could put at second base or third base, and I think for the Orioles' needs right now, you would rather have somebody who could potentially play shortstop, because that just fills a bigger need.
It does, and I think I agree with you there in terms of the positional need, because I would definitely feel more comfortable having Omar Sanchez at second and Jonathan VR at shortstop than I would about Hanser Alberto at second and Richie Martin at shortstop. Because if you don't sign a shortstop here, most likely I would think that the opening day shortstop is going to be Richie Martin.
Most likely, yeah.
I mean, can you think of another maybe Andrew Velasquez.
I think the only
Pat
way that Richie Martin isn't the opening day shortstop is if the Orioles sign a veteran free agent within the next few weeks.
I mean, maybe Pat Valaika.
But I think Pat Valaika is firmly entrenched as a utility guy at this point. I don't think that you would try Pat Valaika as your everyday shortstop.
Right.
And Pat Valaika did have his fair share of struggles defensively at the shortstop position.
The other thing, though, I think it is kind of a domino effect with the other infield positions, because how comfortable are you with Rio Ruiz at third base?
Right.
And if you do bring back Hanser Alberto, that probably gives you the flexibility to move Yolmer Sanchez from second base. We're kind of inserting him into second base for right now. You put Yolmer Sanchez at third base. You put Richie Martin still at shortstop, but now you have Hanser Alberto at second base. So it is kind of a domino effect. I think if you're just looking at not fit, not need right now with this current team, I would personally rather have Hanser Alberto just because I like him better as a player overall, and I do feel better about his consistency and his ability to get on base. But like you said, how much is a team willing to give up for Hanser Alberto? If the Orioles are dangling him at the trade deadline, VR has a larger track record. He has more experience in the league. He's been around on other teams and had success with other teams. Alberto still only has really a 2-year sample size for high production, and really 1.5 years considering the shortened season 2020. So would there be enough value for him outside of the organization? It's a good question to have because that's how the Orioles, as we've said, have to approach every free agent, is not just how will he fit into this team and how will he help this team in the short term, but can we flip him eventually at the deadline?
Right. And that's the thing with VR. I mean, he's been a part of 2 deadline deals over the last 3 years.
And for pretty good prospects.
Right.
I think was it Easton Lucas? Is that the guy that the Orioles got back, I believe, in the Jonathan VR trade with the Marlins originally?
Yes.
And then
obviously the Orioles acquired VR.
Yes. Yeah. And for the Jonathan Scope trade, and he was a part of that. And then, of course, the Blue Jays acquired Jonathan VR for a top 30 prospect at that point. So you don't have that track record of Hanser Alberto being viewed around the league as a big enough trade piece to be added to a playoff contender, and a team trusts him to take over games in their infield. But I just like Alberto more. You know, I just as a player, as a clubhouse guy, he would give us a lot of content.
I think all things equal, if you didn't pretty desperately need, not pretty desperately because I think Richie Martin will be better than people expect at shortstop this season, but if you didn't need a shortstop and all other things were equal, I think the Orioles would probably rather have Hanser Alberto back. Yeah. Because like you said, I mean, he is such a presence in the clubhouse that you would like to retain him if possible. But I think because you need a shortstop and because Jonathan VR might still have a little bit more value around the rest of Major League Baseball if you're trying to flip him in a trade, I think VR probably makes more sense if the contracts are equal. If you can get Alberto for less than VR, then I would say bring Alberto back.
Exactly. I think that's what it'll probably come down to is the price point, and I think Alberto would probably be a little bit cheaper than Jonathan VR. But we'll see. We'll see if either of those guys return to Baltimore. I do, again, think that the Orioles will make a move there. I just don't know who exactly it could be. And I don't know which position it could be. And we, in the meantime, have been slotting Yolmer Sanchez into the starting infield, opening day infield. And that's not a given either. They just, picked him up off waivers a few months ago, and they had some good things to say about him. But Brandon Hyde hasn't gotten to work with him at all yet. We don't know if the Orioles are high enough on him to give him an opening day slot. This could be a Andrew Velasquez, Richie Martin, Rio Ruiz infield. We have no idea.
Right, but I mean, the Orioles aren't strangers to starting guys that they claimed off waivers.
Sure.
I mean, Hanser Alberto was claimed off waivers. Rio Ruiz was claimed off waivers. So they have, over the last few years under Mike Elias, been good at finding these guys on waivers and plugging them into positions that they need. And they have been, like I said, over the last few years, known for that.
All right, let's talk about the outfield and Anthony Santander. And now we're going to open up the chat to really start to roast us at this point. Because
as if that didn't happen every podcast already.
Obviously, Rock Kabako a few days ago wrote a piece on MASNsports.com about the possibility of an Anthony Santander trade. It's an idea that had been floated publicly, I guess, before. He's coming off his best season with the Orioles. Granted, 37 games. But I think you have to have those conversations about almost every player on the roster when you're in the midst of this rebuild like the Orioles are. I think there are only a few guys on this current roster that are 100% safe. I think Ryan Mountcastle, Dean Kramer, Keegan Aiken, and then prospects that haven't yet. Maybe Austin Hayes.
Adley Rutschman.
Guys that haven't made their debuts yet.
Right.
You know, the Baumans, the Lowthers, the Wells. Those guys are all safe. But other than that, everybody is pretty much available for the Orioles. And when it comes to Anthony Santander, he is right on the edge of being a guy that you could view as a long-term piece at the beginning of this rebuild or in the midst of this rebuild, and being just old enough where you worry about his production carrying over to when these teams are eventually going to be good.
Right. And we've talked about the outfield multiple times on this podcast and talked about how crowded it was. That was part of the reason that Renato Nunez was DFA'd at the beginning of this offseason, was just that you would probably have guys from the outfield DHing, and you wouldn't have room for Renato Nunez anymore. When you're looking down the line at this Orioles team, Yusniel Diaz is right on the cusp of making this major league roster, and he is probably going to be taking up one of those corner outfield spots. If you are committed to keeping Ryan Mountcastle in left field, I have argued that I think the Orioles would benefit from shifting him to first base. However, it seems like the O's, at least at the start of the season, have a plan to keep Ryan Mountcastle in left field. He wasn't bad out there.
That's what Mike Elias said, I think, back during the winter meetings, quote
right.
unquote.
I mean, he wasn't a fantastic defensive left fielder, but you just didn't really notice him, which is a good thing, I suppose, because there weren't any issues in left field for Ryan Mountcastle. He was just fine.
Considering he had really not a whole lot of experience playing the position. He, of course, was drafted as a third baseman shortstop. They tried him out at first, worked out pretty well, and then they said, all right, we have Trey Mancini at first base. Let's maybe think about using him in the outfield. And considering he only had, I think, maybe 70 or so games in the outfield in the minor league level, 1 year of experience there, I think he performed fine, but more games, more sample size, would that be a problem?
So at least for right now, Ryan Mountcastle seems to be the left fielder for the Orioles, which really muddies up the outfield a little bit, because now where do you put Cedric Mullins if you want Cedric Mullins to be your starter? Where do you put Austin Hayes if you want Austin Hayes to start? If you want Mullins, Austin Hayes, and Anthony Santander to start in the outfield, you can't do that. There's only two spots if Ryan Mountcastle is your left fielder. And especially looking down the line, Yusniel Diaz is going to get called up soon. And then in a few years, you've got the number 2 overall pick, Heston Kjerstad, who is hopefully going to be your right fielder of the future. So looks like down the line, Anthony Santander might kind of get pushed out if Ryan Mountcastle sticks in left, if Kjerstad and Yusniel Diaz are in right, and then Cedric Mullins and Austin Hayes in center.
And looking at it practically, if your ultimate plan, we don't know what Kjerstad will turn into. We don't know what Diaz will turn into. We don't know if either of those guys can be long-term fixtures in a major league outfield. But if the Orioles want to give them a sufficient opportunity without relying on injuries just sapping time from other guys, in theory, it would make sense to trade a guy like Santander at the height of his value. Right. And if they believe that this is the height of his value, that this is the best he would ever play in those 37 games when he was most valuable Oriole, when he had an OPS close to 900, was carrying the Orioles offense for that month plus, if they believe that that is the best that they are going to see Anthony Santander, in theory, it makes sense to deal him. But I get the other side of the coin, which is he is the best or one of the best. We'll see when Trey Mancini comes back. John Means, of course, is still a very good pitcher. One of the best players on your current roster.
Yes. And he's young.
And he's young.
And he is controllable.
He just turned 26.
Right.
which is young.
Right.
Is young. And for reference, I think Mountcastle is 24, going to be 24 this season. So only 2 years younger,
Right.
and we're talking about him being a long-term fixture. He is also controllable, like you said. Just his first year of arbitration this year is going to be under arbitration for 2 more years after this. So there is a lot to like about him sticking around on this team. And there's no water gun to your head about dealing him.
One of the things that we're talking about in terms of adding to Santander's value with the Orioles right now is that he is a young, talented outfielder who is arbitration eligible for the next few years with a controllable contract. And that is valuable to the Orioles. But the thing is, that's valuable to every team in Major League Baseball. And it increases his trade value. The fact that Anthony Santander is a young, talented outfielder who you can control. So not only is that valuable to the Orioles, but it's also valuable to another team that might be a little bit in a better position to win right now that could use a talented outfielder and one that they can potentially re-sign in a few years and still have some more years of value out of Santander. So not only does it increase his value on the Orioles as it currently stands, it also increases his value around the league, and you'd probably be able to get a pretty good trade package for him.
Well, that's a perfect transition because we're going to talk about some trade partners that might make sense. But first, Brendan, what could the Orioles get back in an Anthony Santander? What could they fetch in an Anthony Santander trade?
Well, the one past deal that I looked at it's hard to find a comparison.
It is very difficult. We were trying to find a comparison for this deal, and it's rare that teams just don't do it often.
Right.
They don't trade young, controllable, fairly productive outfielders at this point in their contract very often because those guys are usually guys you hold on to, but the Orioles are in a unique position.
And one team that we have compared the Orioles to a bunch of times because of similar market sizes and a team that has had a lot of success and it's kind of an optimistic future is the Tampa Bay Rays because they don't have the biggest payroll in the world.
Yeah.
And yet they are able to find guys and develop guys throughout their system to the point where they can make a World Series run. Now, back in 2013, the Rays traded Rookie of the Year Will Myers, 1 year removed from a Rookie of the Year. He had won that award at age 22, and he had a bit of a down season his age 23 season. He hit just .222 with a .614 OPS. But the year before, he was fantastic, showed a ton of potential, and he was, at that point, a corner outfielder. He's since moved down to first base. He had an incredibly controllable contract. He signed a contract extension with the Padres, which is the team that he was traded to in 2014, but he didn't even sign that extension until 2017, and Myers was arbitration eligible until 2019. So they traded him with basically 5 years of control left on his contract. And they got a haul for him. They got Jake Bowers, Rene Rivera, and Birch Smith went to the Tampa Bay Rays. And then it was ended up being a 3-team trade where, funny enough, the Washington Nationals probably got the best part of that trade because they got Joe Ross and a player to be named later. That player to be named later turned out to be Trey Turner. So the Nationals ended up winning that trade. But the Padres had to give up a good amount to get Will Myers because not only was he a young, exciting player, he was a young, exciting player that you could control for a while. So I think that is probably the one deal that I can really think of that could be a basis of comparison because these young, talented players just don't get traded very often.
And even that is not a perfect comparison. It's going to be impossible to find one of those because I remember at that time, Will Myers coming off that Rookie of the Year campaign was still kind of viewed as, I think at one point he was like number 1 prospect in baseball level. He was viewed as a very high level prospect, which Anthony Santander has never been. He's a Rule 5 draft pick, so that shows you what other teams in the league thought of him. He's somebody who kind of built his value through productive season after productive season with the Orioles. Whereas Will Myers was had one productive season, another season not so productive, but had viewed around the league as having immense potential.
Right. He had the reputation,
Yes.
whereas Anthony Santander, while the Orioles like him, and I know Orioles fans think that he has a lot of potential because he has grown pretty well over the last few years, he doesn't have the same potential as a star prospect that somebody like Will Myers did.
Yeah, the only kind of comparisons, and these are, again, not perfect comparisons I could think of, was Tommy Pham maybe being traded by the Rays, where he was still several years away from free agency. He's a little bit older than Santander. He was 29 at the time, but was a very productive outfielder. Was in the midst of a down year when he was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals, coming off a great year, and was, not having a great year when he was dealt. So he was a comparison. Yoenis Cespedes, who was a much better player at the time when he was with Oakland and a little bit older than Anthony Santander, but another case where the team didn't have to trade him. The Rays didn't have to trade Tommy Pham. The Oakland A's didn't have to trade Yoenis Cespedes, but they did it. And because they thought that those guys might be at the peak of their value, and they thought they were not in the cycle of contending to the point where they thought that they needed those guys in the short term.
And it's kind of interesting, too, when you look at the Anthony Santander situation. Mike Elias has talked about, in terms of free agency, he's kind of said that we want to make sure that we're signing players that are going to keep us, winning games at the major league level. However, we don't want to sign guys that are going to be blocking prospects that are coming up throughout the next few years.
Yes.
Anthony Santander is not a free agent, obviously. He is somebody that the Orioles have the potential to re-sign in a few years. But does he almost turn into that similar thinking, like you would think in free agency, where you don't want him to block prospects that could be coming up throughout the next few years? Because you have two really talented right field prospects that are going to be debuting over the next few years in Yusniel Diaz probably this year, and then Heston Kjerstad down the line. It's tough to bank on those two being fantastic, but at one point Yusniel Diaz was their number one prospect in the entire system, and as soon as Adley Rutschman is called up and loses his prospect status, Heston Kjerstad is probably going to be the number one prospect in the Orioles system, which means you could have two right field prospects that were at one time the best prospect in the system.
Right. And there are other factors, like you said, with Ryan Mountcastle. Maybe Mountcastle moves to first full-time. Maybe that opens up a spot in left field. You could move Austin Hayes. You could try Yusniel Diaz out in left field. That you could keep a spot. So there still is not a whole lot of pressure. But given the deals that we just talked about, the Tommy Pham deal, the Yoenis Cespedes deal, the Will Myers deal, what kind of return do you think the Orioles could expect in a deal where they would be trading away their 26-year-old right fielder?
Well, look, personally, I am not incredibly keen on trading Anthony Santander because I think he has a lot of potential.
We love the guy.
We love Anthony Santander, and if you're the Orioles at this point, you don't want to have to trade guys at the major league level who are both young and good. And I don't think fans want to either, because at the surface level, Anthony Santander, we've said it time and time and again, is a young, controllable, talented outfielder. But if you are going to deal him, I had a pretty hefty price, personally. I think that if you were going to get a return for Santander, I would need at least one top 15 prospect. At least one prospect that is close to, if not in the top 30, meaning they are maybe hovering somewhere around the 25 to 30 range in the prospect rankings. Because for the Orioles, if you are getting a prospect that's around 25 to 30, that's probably not in the Orioles' top 30 because they have such a deep system at this point. And then we know Mike Elias is trying to build up, the Dominican Summer League team. So I would probably throw in one far off, but hopefully promising Dominican Summer League prospect. So those would be the three pieces that I would look for in an Anthony Santander trade.
Yeah, I think they could go with either quantity or quality here.
Right.
We have seen them go with quantity. An example would be the Dylan Bundy trade. They get 4 prospects back, none of whom cracked the top 30, but 4 guys as opposed to one top guy. They could go with quality. I would look to a Miguel Castro trade as an example of that, where they ended up getting, I think they got 2 technically because they got Kevin Smith from the Mets, who fit right into their top 15 prospects. I think he fit into number 12 in their system. And maybe they got a Dominican Summer League player as a throw-in, a lower-level guy. But essentially they were going with quality there. So to me, they either have to get quantity or quality. If they're going to go with quantity, they have to get 3 or 4 guys who are not going to be in that top 30.
Right. And first, and as we're discussing this trade, I would just like to say that this is a real testament to the Orioles' development and the Orioles' coaching. The fact that Anthony Santander was a Rule 5 draftee, and he has now
Yes.
turned into a piece that the Orioles could potentially flip for a few very good prospects.
He is definitely similar to how Michael Givens was a testament to the Orioles development system. Santander fits that category as well.
Yes.
And a lot, of course, is credit to him for building himself up that way.
Absolutely.
If you're going to go with quantity, I think it has to be 3 or 4 prospects who are not in the top 30. And if you're going to go with quality, I would like somebody, like you said, that is it. You said top 15 going to be in your system. I'd say, maybe top 25, top 20. I think that would be okay because of where the Orioles system is now. I think you have to get either one of those things if you're going to be moving Anthony Santander. And I think that because of all the reasons we listed, I think Michael Elias will have a similarly high price point when it comes to Santander. All right, Let's talk about which teams might be willing to surrender those prospects in a trade. The name of the team that we have heard the most connected to Santander is the Miami Marlins. And those were reports, I believe, John Heyman, and I think our own MASNsports.com's Rockabacco connected the Marlins to Anthony Santander. The Marlins, I think, make sense because, look, 1 year ago when Jonathan VR was traded to the Marlins, it was a similar type deal. It was a guy that, they thought that they're not going to go out and spend big bucks in free agency. They're not at that point in their rebuild. They're a little bit further along than the Orioles in their rebuild, so they want some guys who can contribute. They feel like they can compete for maybe a wild card spot, and they want somebody who is going to be with them probably for a few years. So not just a stopgap who is going to get them over the top and get them back to the playoffs. They're looking for somebody who they think this guy can be our right fielder for a few years. And because he is cheap. He comes with arbitration level salary. He's not going to be the level of a George Springer, of a Michael Brantley, where they would have to go out in free agency and grab somebody. So I think the Marlins, for those reasons, I think that's why they're interested, and that's why they've been connected to Santander.
Yeah, I had a potential trade with the Marlins. The Orioles would trade Santander to Miami, and in return, they would get their number 12 overall prospect. It was a second-round pick this year, lefty Dax Fulton. He would probably slot in as the 3rd or 4th best lefty in the Orioles rotation, but he's pretty far off and he has room to grow. And I think he has the potential to turn into maybe even the 2nd best lefty in the Orioles system. Number 28 prospect, Victor Mesa Jr., who was an international signing last year, was actually the lesser of the prospects that were signed between him and his brother, Victor Mesa. Victor Mesa Jr., their number 28 overall outfield prospect, and then a Dominican Summer League prospect.
Yeah.
I think Mike Elias, no matter what trade gets done, will just throw in one of those guys.
And he has said that before. He said we always look for a throw-in. It's like in the NBA, it's like a second-round pick being thrown in at the end because they are just lottery picks, essentially. These guys are so young, and oftentimes the guys that get thrown in are not highly regarded, but they might have a higher ceiling because of their age, and there's just not as much known about these guys considering they're 16, 17, 18 years old. So you might as well, because they have struggled so long in that international market, you might as well try to build up your system by just getting throw-ins and trades.
Right.
I think those are two. I could see either of those deals going down. I like Dax Fulton because he's a recent pick. So we've done some research on him. I could see the Orioles, if they're going to do this deal, for whatever reason, I could just see them making this move with somebody who, for a prospect who is a lower level prospect, somebody who is several years away from the bigs. Because if they do, let's say they do this deal for like a higher level outfielder prospect,
why?
They're going to have the same problem that they already have.
Yeah.
So, I could see them going pitching. But I most likely would see them looking for a lower level prospect at this point. So Miami makes sense. What other teams do you think might make sense as trade partners?
Yeah, another team I had was the Minnesota Twins.
Okay.
The Twins need a corner outfielder. They got rid of Eddie Rosario this offseason, and they have a hole in left field. I don't know if Santander would shift over to left, or they could move Max Kepler over to left. They could arrange their outfield somehow. But the Twins are obviously an American League team that is competing right now. And because Santander you're not trading a prospect at this point, Santander would help the Twins pretty much right away. And I think they would be able to give up a good package to get Santander. So the mock trade that I have is the Twins trading their number 10 pitching prospect, Blaine Enlow. He's 2 years away. He could be a starting...
He's 2 years old.
He is 2 years old. He's probably 2 years away from the majors. He could be a rotation arm. He would probably slot in as, I think, the second or third best righty in the Orioles system. They would also trade their number 26 overall prospect is a catcher, Ben Wortvit.
Okay.
He is a glove-first backstop who is pretty much MLB ready, so he could serve as a backup catcher if you want to move either Pedro Severino or Chance Sisco, and then again, a Dominican Summer League prospect.
I like those deals.
I think the Twins might be willing to give up a little bit more to outbid somebody else because the Twins are competing in the American League.
And they are... I don't think that the Twins are desperate right now, but they haven't won a playoff game in forever.
I don't think they're desperate, but if they have a chance to get a position of need for cheap without spending a lot of money in free agency, I think the Twins would be all over that.
And they are in a suddenly very deep division.
Right.
With the White Sox are breathing right down their throat. So I could see the Twins being a candidate there. I could also see the Braves being a potential candidate. Nick Markakis is now a free agent, which, by the way, we never talked about. Would be fun if Nick Markakis came back.
That would be fun.
But for all the reasons we just talked about, they don't need a right fielder.
Right.
But Markakis is a free agent. They have some depth. They have Ozuna. But they could potentially look for maybe a little bit of depth because they are a team that is in another tough division. Miami, for similar reasons, is going to be competitive in that division. You have the Mets on the rise now, maybe looking for a bite of the division crown, and you still have the Nationals in that division. So I think they might be looking for some kind of depth in their outfield. Another team that I had, which it depends on where they are and where they think they are, is Cleveland, because I don't know if they're in the full rebuild quite yet. I think that they probably don't want to tear it all down at this point. Obviously, the Francisco Lindor trade signals that they're not 100% competing, but I think that Santander could make sense to them because their outfield production has been so poor for the past several years. They have Josh Naylor really as their starting outfielder, Bradley Zimmer, Oscar Mercado, like not good talent in the outfield. So I could see them, and for similar reasons, if they want to take a step back in 2021 and then get right back into the fold in 2022, Santander makes sense because he could help them over the course of his contract.
Yeah, and the last team that I had that I thought might be interested in a Santander trade was the Philadelphia Phillies, because the Phillies are kind of in this precarious spot where they seem to think that they are competing and they're not really. So
that's a lot of teams right now in baseball.
Yeah, a lot, like a lot of teams in baseball, but the Phillies could use help in the outfield, and I think they could be a team that could trade for Santander as well. I'm going to sound like a broken record going through the trade again, but I have them trading their number 10 overall prospect, who's a left-handed pitcher, their number 29 overall prospect, who is a shortstop, and then another Dominican Summer League player.
Okay.
So all of my trades are pretty similar.
Yeah, and Cleveland, by the way, would be the team that let him go in the Rule 5 draft, so
right.
I think that would be fun for certain reasons. One other team I just want to throw out there, I could see the Astros being a team, considering they just lost George Springer. I know he's a center fielder, but they're bringing back Brantley. What exactly is their plan? They have Kyle Tucker in the outfield. They don't really have a true center fielder on the roster.
The Astros probably, again, one of those teams that thinks they're competing and probably won't end up doing so.
I'm glad you brought up the Phillies, and we talked about the Marlins and the Braves. National League teams, we still don't 100% know if the DH is coming to the National League. We don't think it is at this point because we've heard reports about a rejected offer, I think, from the Players Association, and no counter offer. But we still don't have 100% knowledge of what the season is going to look like DH-wise, doubleheader-wise, runner on second and extra innings. We don't have 100% answers on any of that stuff. So if the DH somehow gets pulled out at the last minute negotiations and thrown in to the National League, then I think this market explodes for Anthony Santander, because teams like the Phillies, even if they don't view, maybe they don't have a spot in right field, they have Bryce Harper in right field, but maybe they need a DH all of a sudden, and they think Santander can fit in there. Or other teams like, the Braves, maybe they want to stick Santander in right field and put their everyday right fielder as a DH. So I think that this market could explode, but it's looking like there's going to be no DH in the NL.
Yeah, and we have a comment from Andy on Facebook that says, guessing we're just waiting for Adley to come up to build around him and Mountcastle. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Him and Mountcastle, and it just so happens that the other top prospects in the system are coming up around the same time.
Him, Mountcastle, Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall.
Right. It's that timetable, though. Yeah. It is the Adley Rutschman, Ryan Mountcastle timetable. And Anthony Santander, there is a possibility that he is just slightly ahead of that timetable, and Mike Elias and company might be better suited just sticking with their prospects and going with Yusniel Diaz and Heston Kjerstad rather than re-signing Anthony Santander down the line.
One possibility I have here, and I thought about, what if the Orioles try to use a Santander trade to attach Alex Cobb as a piece? I do think they still want to trade Alex Cobb. I don't think that contract is particularly palatable, considering it has a lot of deferred money.
Right.
And teams are looking to cut costs across the league. But maybe you include Anthony Santander in a deal for Alex Cobb. A team gets... I could see it being similar to, obviously not the same exact situation, but remember David Price was included
in the Mookie
Betts trade as a less than palatable option for the Dodgers because he had been injured recently, declining production, and a huge price point. They just wanted to get off of his money. That deal was a bad deal for the Red Sox. But the similar deal, the similar idea that, hey, let's put Santander, who is a great asset, Alex Cobb, who is not a great asset, give them to a contending team, and now all of a sudden they have a good young outfielder, and they have a 4 or 5 starter if they need him.
Yeah, I could see it, but the only thing there is that if you are including Alex Cobb in an Anthony Santander trade, Cobb is probably bringing down the value of that Santander trade a little bit, which means that you're more or less conceding that you probably won't be able to deal Alex Cobb on his own based on the fact that a contender might need a back end of their rotation starting pitcher.
Yeah.
You're pretty much saying, okay, the Alex Cobb contract wasn't good.
Is such a bad asset.
And we just don't want it anymore, and we are conceding that we probably won't be able to deal it on its own. I think there's a chance that they still could deal it on its own, but if Mike Elias has gotten the vibe from around the league that Alex Cobb's contract on its own just is not tradable and isn't worth going to a contender, then maybe you throw it in, but it probably hurts Santander's value because
it does.
Yes, you're getting an outfielder that you can control, but you're also getting a lot of bad money.
Right, exactly, which is we don't know exactly what the league thinks of Cobb. I think he's trending that way. Like, I think that contract is still not viewed as a positive asset.
Right.
And I think if this were normal times, I think that contract might be more palatable to teams and they might be more willing to swallow that. But because we're seeing even the biggest of contenders, the Yankees just traded one of their best relievers yesterday to get under the luxury tax,
to the Red Sox,
to their rival.
Yeah.
So these teams are really looking to shed money. So maybe it's gotten to the point where Alex Cobb is not worth the contract that he's on for any team. But
it's a possibility.
But, I don't think the Orioles have reached that point yet. I still think they want to give him some more starts in 2021 to maybe boost his value, maybe make that contract make a little more sense, and then they can trade him.
And there's only, this is the last year of the Alex Cobb deal.
It is, but the problem is he's got that backloaded money.
Right.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, well, not worst case scenario, but I think there's a chance that Cobb stays on the team for the season, and you probably just have to eat that money.
Right. I think that they are trying to avoid that at all costs.
Right.
But that being said, do you want your biggest, maybe best trade piece right now, the return
attached
of that
with
trade,
Alex Cobb, right,
to have been lessened because you were attaching a negative value asset to that deal?
Well, I guess we'll see.
Paul,
water gun to your head right now. Do you want to trade Anthony Santander?
No, I don't. And I don't think they need to. But the better question, water gun to your head, do you think they do before opening day? I say yes. I think it is going to happen.
I think they do.
Which is that's just a guess. We have no inside knowledge.
As I'm saying it out loud, I think is slightly disappointing to say out loud, and I would understand why Orioles fans would be disappointed if that happens. But if you are blown away by an Anthony Santander trade, not only are you getting hopefully really good pieces in return, you are also opening up spots for Yusniel Diaz, for Ryan McKenna, who we haven't really touched on this podcast, and for Heston Kjerstad a few years down the line. So don't panic if Anthony Santander is traded, because hopefully that means you got a really good return and you are now giving somebody like Yusniel Diaz a lot more opportunity in the corner outfield.
If they do trade him before opening day, who is the Orioles' opening day outfield left to right?
I think left field Ryan Mountcastle, center field Cedric Mullins, who really came on last year, and right field Austin Hayes. Yep. I think Austin Hayes and Cedric Mullins both give you really good value in center, and you want to keep them both in the outfield. I have argued this because of their defensive value. And then you've still got Ryan McKenna as your fourth outfielder. I think he makes the opening day roster. And then hopefully Yusniel Diaz comes up at some point in the season. And that's a really solid five-man outfield if the plan is to keep Ryan Mountcastle in left field. If the plan is to move him down to first base, then it's not as strong of an outfield. But if the plan is to keep Ryan Mountcastle in left field, which admittedly I have argued against, then it makes sense to make room for the rest of these guys.
Yeah, I would agree. Left to right, I think it would be Mountcastle, Mullins, Hayes, and I do think the opening day outfield, regardless of what happens before opening day, I think the opening day outfield will be different from the outfield that we will see on the final weekend of the regular season.
Oh, absolutely. And regardless, honestly, if Anthony Santander is traded or not, it might go from a great outfield to a good outfield, but either way, I think it's going to be a really solid outfield. If Austin Hayes is able to stay healthy, if Cedric Mullins keeps trending in the right direction, and if Ryan Mountcastle keeps playing like the stud he looked like last year, it's still going to be a good outfield, even without Anthony Santander.
It's amazing. I feel like we almost haven't talked about Mountcastle enough this offseason because he was so good in those 33 games that we just pencil him in. We put
him in Sharpie at this point.
In terms of at least the near future of the Orioles, because he was that good. I mean, he was that good that he showed so much potential that it's not a position that you have to worry about. You know, whether it's left or first, we feel very good that he is going to be incredibly productive offensively in the future. All right. Let us know what you think in terms of whether the Orioles should trade Anthony Santander, which teams you think might be interested, and what you think the Orioles could get in an Anthony Santander trade. Brendan, we teased last podcast about the all pasta draft.
This is what the people came to listen to.
We did the all Camden Yards draft. We saw some ideas. I think we might eventually do the all Memorial Stadium draft, which would be very fun.
That would be fun.
All Earl Weaver draft. We're trying to draft
all Orioles draftee.
We're trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
All Orioles draft.
All Orioles draft.
All Orioles draft.
And now we're going to do the Pasta Podcast or the Pasta Cast, which we joked about.
Draft.
If you give us anything, we will draft it. We have made that promise to you.
The more stupid that it is, the less time we spend on it.
Is it more stupid or stupider?
Exactly.
All right. Let's do a 3-round pasta draft, Brendan.
Let's do it.
Real quick. People are going to be, the comments are just going to be exploding.
Yes.
Positively or negatively. Brendan, you have the first pick. This is a 3-round pasta draft. Give me your best pasta, and we'll do this rapid fire.
My first overall pick is penne because I am basic, and it is a staple. Penne goes first.
I think penne is the right pick at that point. I think the value is too great to pass up. Now, because it's a snake draft, I have 2-3 at this point, and I've been thinking about it. I have my big board.
Yeah.
Tricolor Rotini goes right off the board.
It has to. Yep.
You have the taste, you have the color, you have the flavor. Can't go with a whole lot of sauces, so it's not versatile. But Tricolor Rotini, for what you're getting, bang for your buck, is my number 2 pick. Yep. My number 3 pick, Gemelli. Wow. They are the little twisties. They are
the little twisty guys.
They're compact, so you get a bowl full, and you get a full stomach. I like Gemelli. Excellent in butter. They're my number 3 overall.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I have destroyed you in this pasta draft because my next 2 picks, I have the snake draft. It's going to be spaghetti because, I mean, that's just classic. You can't not pick spaghetti.
I'm not a
You're
fan of
wrong.
long pasta.
You're
I'm
wrong.
not a fan of long pasta.
And then my next pick is going to be tortellini. Just hammer home tortellini. And now I have...
Tortellini was 4th on my big board.
Look at it. Okay, I have got penne. That's the classic. I've got spaghetti. We want spaghetti and meatballs. You know where to find me. And then I've got tortellini. I have 3 diverse pastas, and I could not be happier with how my draft went. And no matter what pasta you pick with your last pick, I have won.
What I like
That's
about
the conclusion.
What I like about your 3-team pasta draft here, Brendan, is that all 3 go well in different sauces. And I think you could get one sauce. You could just get a marinara, a red sauce, and you could eat penne, tortellini, and spaghetti with marinara. You get an Alfredo, you could eat penne.
All of them.
Well, maybe that's a little too much cheese with tortellini, but tortellini Alfredo, is that a thing?
I don't know. It sounds good.
All right, my Mr.
All I know is that I
Irrelevant,
won.
my final pick. I like fusilli. I like radiatore. I like
getting too
orchette.
fancy on me.
I'm going to go with ravioli.
That's a good pick.
I need a cheesy pasta to compete with your cheesy pasta. Tortellini is better than ravioli. That's hands down. I've seen him at the combine. He just the 40 is better. The athleticism is better. I think that he is a better pick. However, left with the option, I think ravioli, another excellent pasta.
Let me just say that
It's my Mel Kiper Jr.
no macaroni is bogus. No mac and cheese. Wow.
No mac and cheese? What do you mean?
Well, we don't have macaroni. Nobody drafted macaroni.
Macaroni just means pasta.
It's little macaroni noodles, Paul.
Like the shells?
You're off the
Macaroni
rails.
just means
You're off the
pasta.
rails.
Unbelievable. All right. That's our 3-team pasta draft. Give us anything, we'll draft it. We will draft anything on the planet. All right. That just about does it for the MASN All Access podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for the comments. Again, please be nice to each other in the comments. Don't comment anything utterly mean and something that your grandmother would not like to see you comment. And I think that goes with all social media. I think we could all be a little bit nicer to each other, so please keep that in mind in our comments as well. But for those of you who have been following along, who have been saying nice, good things, we really appreciate it. And be sure to rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Brendan, what's your Twitter handle?
It's at Brendan Morty.
And I am at Paul Mancano. Thanks, of course, to Hannah Broder, who's doing a terrific job, as always, behind the scenes running our social media. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back in about a week. We are just a few weeks away from spring training, crazy enough.
We hope so.
We hope so. We may have to do some spring training takes at some point.
Hopefully they aren't as bad as your Tampa Bay Buccaneers take.
No, I don't think anything tops that.
I don't think it will.
All right, we'll see you later.